The controversial Baltic Sea pipeline Nord Stream 2 will probably no longer be approved in the first half of the year. According to the Federal Network Agency, further steps are missing after the entry in the commercial register. So that means rapid approval for the Nord Stream 2 Baltic Sea pipeline is not to be expected, despite the establishment of a German subsidiary. The president of the Federal Network Agency, Jochen Hohmann, told the German newspaper Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung that the entry in the commercial register had taken place, but there are no further steps. If you look at the exams that are still outstanding, one quickly comes to the conclusion that it will hardly be possible to complete them in the first half of the year. With the establishment of a German subsidiary, Nord Stream 2 AG complied with the requirement of the Federal Network Agency in the certification process. The new gas transport company Gas for Europe GmbH, based in Schwerin, will submit the necessary documents for the continuation of the certification process as soon as possible, a spokesman announced on Wednesday. The background to the procedure is the EU Gas Directive, which stipulates that the operation of the pipeline and the sale of the gas must be separated. Formally, the sole shareholder of Nord Stream 2 AG is the Russian gas company Gazprom. Chancellor Schröder is working for them, by the way, former Chancellor. Nord Stream 2 AG, based in Zug in Switzerland, had applied to the Federal Network Agency for certification as an independent operator. However, the authorities stopped the procedure for the time being in November and pointed out that the transport network operator had to be a company under German law. Russia has massed troops on the border with Ukraine and the West fear an invasion. The Kremlin rejects this accusation but makes extensive demands on the NATO countries. And since last week, there have been meetings between representatives of NATO and Russia, but they have so far brought no results. And now, Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas has called on Germany to help Ukraine in the current tense situation. She said, "We encourage our German partners to listen to the Ukrainians. Ukraine has asked for help. The country needs help in defending itself against the aggressor," Kallas told a German newspaper. Estonia wants to give Ukraine 9 howitzers from old GDR stocks, but the NATO member has undertaken to obtain Germany's consent before passing them on to third parties. Kallas rejected demands from Moscow to have a say in the design of the security architecture of Central and Eastern European countries. She says, "We cannot allow Russia to restore its political and military influence over its neighbors. Russia has no say in NATO decisions, and we will not respond to Russia's ultimatums." Kallas called the danger of a war real, and she said, "We must be prepared for the appropriate steps if Russia gives up diplomacy." In this case, sanctions against Moscow would have to be robust, tough, and precise. The corona incidence in Germany is still climbing and has reached a new high again. The Robert Koch Institute reported 78,318 new infections and 61 deaths within 24 hours. The Robert Koch Institute has reported an increase in the nationwide 7-day incidence and thus a new record. The RKI gave the value of new infections per 100,000 inhabitants and per week on Monday morning as 1,176.8. The previous day, the value was 1,156.8. A week ago, the nationwide incidence was 840.3. The health authorities in Germany reported 78,380 new corona infections to the RKI within 1 day, and this emerges from figures that reflects the status of the RKI dashboard right in the morning. A week ago, there were just 63,000 infections. Experts assume a high and increasing number of cases that are not recorded in the RKA data, partly because testing capacities and health authorities are at their limits in many places. In addition, some cities and districts have been reporting problems with the transmission of the number of corona cases for days. According to the new information, 61 deaths were recorded across Germany within 24 hours. A week ago, that was 28. The RKI has counted 9,815,533 detected infections with COVID since the beginning of the pandemic. The actual total number is likely to be significantly higher as many infections go undetected. The number of corona-infected patients who came to clinics per 100,000 inhabitants within 7 days was 4.72, according to the RKI. These may also include people with a positive corona test who have another main illness. The RKI gave the number of recovered people on Monday as 7,622,400. The number of people who died from or with proven infection of SARS-CoV-2 rose to 117,786. The European Commission and the Network of National Consumer Protection Authorities, the CPC, on Thursday wrote to WhatsApp asking them to further explain the 2021 changes to its terms of service and the privacy policy, and to ensure that they comply with EU consumer law. WhatsApp needs to ensure that users understand what they are consenting to and how their personal data is being used, particularly when it is shared with business partners, stressed EU Justice Commissioner Didier Reynders. I expect WhatsApp to be fully compliant with EU rules to protect consumers and their privacy. That's why we opened the official dialogue today. WhatsApp has until the end of February to give us specific commitments on how the company will address our concerns. Following a warning from the European Consumers Union, the BEUC, the Commission and the National Consumer Protection Authorities, led by the Swedish Consumer Protection Agency, are asking WhatsApp to explain how the company is meeting its obligations under EU consumer law. The aim is to clarify whether consumers are informed sufficiently clearly about the consequences of their decision to accept or reject the company's new terms of service, whether WhatsApp's in-app notifications asking consumers to read the new terms and privacy policy to accept are reasonable, and whether consumers have sufficient opportunity to familiarize themselves with the new terms before accepting them. The Commission and Consumer Protection Authorities are also concerned about the sharing of users' personal data between WhatsApp and third parties or other Facebook or now Meta companies. The EU has reaffirmed its solidarity with vulnerable populations in the countries of West and Central Africa and announced on Thursday a humanitarian aid budget of 175 million euros for 2022. The funds will be allocated to humanitarian projects in 8 countries. That's Burkina Faso with 23.5 million, Cameroon with 16 million, Central African Republic with 17 million, Chad with 26.5, Mali with 25 million, Mauritania with 8.5, Niger with 24, and Nigeria with 34 million euros. And Commissioner for Crisis Management Janusz Lenarčič said about this: the people of West and Central Africa continue to be affected by a complex humanitarian crisis. Serious violations of children's rights, gender-based violence, kidnappings and assaults, arbitrary arrests and extrajudicial executions are a systematic occurrence. Humanitarian needs are being exacerbated by an unprecedented food crisis, natural disasters, climate change, and the COVID-19 pandemic. And Lenarčič continued, EU assistance is being used to address basic needs, including through the provision of nutrition, health, and protection assistance, and improved access to clean water. EU humanitarian aid in West and Central African countries has several objectives. One is life-saving assistance for people affected by conflict and for the communities that host people who have had to flee their homes. Another one is protecting vulnerable populations and supporting respect for international humanitarian law in principle. And there is supporting actions to combat food crises and severe acute malnutrition among children under 5 years of age, and the emergency aid for basic needs of the most vulnerable groups of the population, in particular with regard to universal health coverage or the education of children affected by humanitarian crises, and also strengthening the preparedness of fragile communities against crises such as mass displacement or recurring food or climate crises. This assistance is part of broader EU support to the region, including through Team Europe's contributions to the global coronavirus response, supporting for vaccine distribution under the COVAX facility, and other actions to strengthen fragile health systems in the long term. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.